KMKB.com or Lucy or whatever. You saw my video with it? No, I looked outside.
He's right by the microphone. There you go.
Good luck getting everyone's attention.
I know. I'm going to start the process. Good.
I'm going to get the heck out of the way.
That's for the... Okay. First thing I need is batteries.
Okay, who do we ask?
Start with Julie Shilman. Check. Can I have everyone's attention? Can anybody whistle? Somebody do the whistle thing. There we go. All right. One would have been fine. We are going to start the remarks here very shortly. As you can see, the podium is set up right here. So if the folks kind of on the dance floor if you could maybe cycle your way down. If you're in a spot where you can't exactly see, I assure you there will be no reason to see us. You can hear throughout the whole room. So if you guys could start filtering. We do want to start this soon just because we have a live webcast. And so folks are probably tuning in, looking at the back of your head. So if you could grab a drink, head on down. We'll get started here just in just a few minutes. Thanks.
Chris, you want a drink? I got you. What do you want for a drink?
Actually, I just got one. Appreciate it. Thank you, man. Yeah, appreciate that. Hey. I do. Are you good? Are you trying to find batteries?
I couldn't figure. God dang it! It's double A's, right?
It's gonna be double A's, yeah.
Okay, here, over here. I was like, are they triple? They double?
Yeah.
What the hell?
If Phil were here, he'd have his go bag. I can't.
And it's only 2, I'm pretty sure.
It looks like
this,
2.
yeah,
there we go.
out.
Look at that. I've replaced enough of these on the fly. We'll do that guy first so we know where they go. Pull that out.
That's all right.
Hope that this thing's not on and they're listening to me do this. Like they like different places will offer me like a lavalier mic, and I'm like, no, because I don't know what to do with my hands, and I would be the guy that left it on and went to the bathroom.
I'd be playing with the fuzzy thing.
Actually, that might be on.
Yes.
That's actually the webcam mic, so somebody might have just heard all that.
Okay, I see.
I want to say there are quite a few folks you might want to see.
Okay. And no one listened to me. They're all going to stand right there. Now that you're here, we can start.
Plenty of seats now.
I didn't do it.
Hit some wood, Bob.
That's right. I still miss that. I'm like, oh,
I'm probably gonna need a drink at some point. I don't know where I'm gonna go between the speakers. Should I go right or left? Either that or a new one because it's about done. Vodka soda. Take a little something for yourself.
Get these people moving.
Okay. All right, folks, if I could have your attention, we are going to go ahead and get started. Can I get one of my whistlers again? There we go. All right, let me start by seeing kind of where we're at tech-wise. Can everybody hear? I can only hear a certain amount of people in the back. All right, I will tell you this. With the list of speakers we have, it's probably going to be north of an hour. So if you're standing up here and would rather sit down there, now would be the time to make that move. I will say, please try to keep this part here clear because we are webcasting this. Thanks, Dave, for doing that. No, you're fine. You're fine. I'll call you up. Okay. All right. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for being here. My name is Chris Covey. I'm a friend of Scott's. I've known Scott for maybe 25 years, a couple of decades. I met him through the Barristers Organization, which is a group of smart-ass lawyers who think they're funny, and they get together once a year and they put on a Christmas show. Scott was... my job tonight is mostly to facilitate a series of speakers. The folks that are here tonight are beloved friends, dear family, and politicians. So we're going to get through. My wife told me not to tell jokes, but it's in my nature, and it's what Scott would have wanted. I will say this. I'm going to say one sincere thing about Scott, and then we're going to move right into some other folks. The one thing about Scott that I don't think enough people really appreciated was he was passionate, he was smart, he was intelligent, like we know it, he was fierce, he was all those things, but it was too easy to just chalk it up as him getting mad about something and thinking there ought to be a change and then going out and destroying that. He never did that. If you look at all the various things he accomplished in his life, and I'm not talking about all the folks he represented, you'll hear from some of those later, but in the legislature or even afterwards, when he saw something he didn't like, he found a way to make it better. And that was really the legacy that I see that Scott left behind is he would get passionate about something and then he didn't just bitch about it. He went out and he fixed it, or he found people that helped him fix it. A lot of you in the room were part of that process. So I will tell one story about Scott, and then we'll move on. The base of our relationship was humor. I don't think I'm exaggerating when I say this. I don't think I ever had a conversation with Scott by text, in person, by phone, by Zoom for a while, where we didn't laugh about something. Literally every single time. He would call me up and we'd talk about legal stuff. I'm a lawyer. He would talk to me about legal stuff because he was a solo practitioner and he just want to bounce something off me. And no matter how serious the issue was, we ended up laughing. We would spiral out of control, just joking, punchline on punchline. And there was one particular day, we were out bar hopping one afternoon, and it was a weekday, and it was St. Patrick's Day. And we're with our very good friend, Kristen Lynch. And Kristen had brought along her 12-year-old niece, Maggie. And if you're wondering why a 12-year-old is bar hopping with us, the only thing I can tell you is that Kristen was Irish. But we're going around to these bars, and after about 3 hours, Scott and I are in the back of the car, and she turns around and she said, "Do you guys just laugh at everything you say?" And we thought, is this thing cutting out? Cut off. Did it? Do you get out? No, I just put new batteries in it. Check. Uh-oh.
Scott saying you gotta stop.
Check. There we go. All right. It may have an auto turn off feature for those of you that are speaking. And so she turned to us and she said, "Do you guys laugh at everything you say?" And yes, we did. We laughed at everything we said. And I think that's what I'm going to miss most about him is just his larger than life personality, his sense of humor. You'll hear some people talk about how great he was as a statesman, a politician, a lawyer, but just being around him was fun all the time. And that's about the best thing I can say about the guy. And so with that, we are going to go ahead and move on. I will tell you, to Scott's great ire, there is no light telling the speakers to be quiet at 3 minutes, like in the committee hearings. And we're going to bring up our first speaker. So our first speaker tonight is the only one who's really known him longer than anybody in this room. And I'm going to swear a little bit. I apologize. But one of Scott's favorite phrases was, anytime you talked about anything for more than about 12 seconds, he'd cut you off with, "I didn't ask for your life story, bitch." And so now, to tell you about his life story, please welcome his sister, Deb Lautenbaugh.
Now, are you going to come back and bring up the next person? Okay, thank you. Thank God I don't have to follow the lawyers and the politicians. Stressed about that all day. Well, good evening. I want to say, first of all, can you hear me? I can't tell. Okay. I loved and admired my brother. I have had time to reflect back over our lives. And like many of you, I'm sure have experienced, you have regrets that we should have done more, should have spent more time together with someone before he or she is gone. I moved away from Nebraska in 1991, so we didn't spend much time together, and eventually our family time, as many of you also probably share, became focused on our ill parents for quite a number of years. I watched him graduate law school, become a senator, get married, raise a family, all from a distance and with great pride. As I have spent time reminiscing with family members, and after reading his wonderful obituary, I realized just how much of the richness of his life I actually missed. But when I think of my brother, I think of these things. Growing up, it would be his beer can collection when he was a little kid. I don't know how many he ended up with, or even why it was a thing, but they lined the family garage for decades. When I think of my brother, I think of Monty Python, Frasier, Cheers, Saturday Night Live, South Park, and so many other shows and movies that appealed to him in his wit, humor, and sarcasm. He used to send me foreign greeting cards for birthdays and holidays. He would find some obscure language card and ship it off, always something different. He was that kind of brother. He was always so witty, as you'll hear and you all know, and was never without the perfect bon mot for any occasion. I loved that about him, and I was so envious of that ability. For a short time, he was my roommate in my first house here in Omaha. Though I can't remember a lot about that time, I do remember having to venture into his room fairly often to recover dishes and silverware when there was none left in the kitchen, as those were not his neat and tidy years. Well, no one's perfect. When I came to Omaha for visits, we would often go to dinner at a nice restaurant just to talk, laugh, and catch up. For years, it was just the two of us, and eventually it evolved into dinners with his family. The Bonefish Grill was a favorite place. In recent years, we had more phone conversations and visits, and he was always talking about the boys and what they were up to. Growing up, the Lautenbaughs were not a demonstrative family in words or gestures. It just didn't come easily to us. I was moved and touched a few years ago when at the end of one of our calls, Scott said, "I love you. We don't say that enough." So from then on, we always said, I love you, often at the same time, or trying to beat the other one. Although Scott and I were not aligned philosophically and politically, he did influence me and helped me clarify my own thoughts and positions. A bigger surprise, though, was his influence in culinary matters, which I found extraordinary, as I consider myself to be the cook and foodie of our family. He nudged me to my first Instapot, and then made me a disciple of his beloved sous vide cooking technique. I think my brother found a way to sous vide anything and everything. Being the eldest sibling, I wanted Scott to look up to me, but I eventually realized he was the one I looked up to. He had such strong convictions and he did things that mattered. Many of those accomplishments are, of course, outlined in his obituary, and you'll hear from everybody who knows more about that. Within the last 2 years, Scott came out to Montana for a visit. I was thrilled that he came with Laura and their good friend, Stephanie. Although it was a short visit, I'll never forget sitting on my deck at night with all of them, looking out at the mountains and the stars. And the next day we went to Yellowstone Park before parting ways. I had hoped those visits were going to continue for years. Of course, Scott was not a saint and could be absolutely maddening. That's part of being a little brother. He was frequently non-responsive and oblique when he did respond. Nevertheless, I will miss him, my dear brother. As he would often say, discuss amongst yourselves. Thank you, those here or participating via live stream, for being a part of his far too short life. Please hold him in your memories and in your hearts. Thank you.
Thank you, Deb. Next up, we have one of Scott's political colleagues and partners in crime. Please welcome former state senator Ken Shills.
Thank you. Well, good evening, everyone. I'm so sorry that we have to all get together at this time, at this place, to think of and honor Scott. He was a great friend, and I'm going to miss him very much. And here we go. There are many things that one could say about Scott's attributes and abilities in life: leader, mentor, protector, defender of freedom, father, brother, partner, and friend. His honesty, integrity, intelligence, and his innate ability to cut to the chase. His ability to disagree with someone or have an opposite opinion on an issue and still maintain respect. His fun-loving attitude and ability to make people feel comfortable around him, even when he disagreed, was a talent and character trait that not many possess. His sincerity and caring nature will always be remembered. From my first day in the legislature, he took me under his wing. He was my mentor, confidant, and protector, more than I ever knew or understood. I was not the only beneficiary of his guidance and protection. He was the leader, mentor, and senior member of what was known as the CLAC, a group of like-minded conservative senators, including, and I think most of them are here in this room, Charlie Jansen, Tyson Larson, John Moranti, and myself. Scott took it upon himself to help shape us as senators and taught us how to best strategize and tactically navigate the legislative process. Regardless of a particular bill's success or failure, Scott ensured that we gained something or learned from every endeavor. I know I speak for every member of the CLAC when I say we are going to miss you and everything you did and meant for the causes we undertook. Scott's belief in conservatism and personal freedom dictated his positions on every issue he faced. One issue, allowing cigar bars in the state was one of those issues. It's okay, go ahead, guys, please. One of those many issues that, as we've heard, many of you know was something he was personally interested in. That particular issue also shows Scott's ability to allow others to share in the success of his initiatives. When his bill was passed, but then found to be constitutionally flawed, he had no compunction in allowing Senator Larson to carry the bill that would ultimately fix the issue identified by the court. Another notable passion project Scott had was finding solutions for the lagging Nebraska horse racing industry. While he wasn't a fan of gambling per se, nor was he heavily involved in agriculture, he understood the importance of the horse racing industry to the state and the people who relied upon it for their livelihood. With that understanding, he embarked upon a career-long fight to find solutions for the numerous racetracks around the state. And while he was never able to find the right answers for the horse racing industry during his tenure in the legislature, he was vindicated with the passage of the racetrack casino ballot measure. I want to take a moment now to highlight Scott's role as protector and one of the instances where that happened. One day on the floor of the legislature, and I believe it was Senator Morante, was making comments on the mic when Senator Chambers stood up and began attacking Senator Morante. Let's see, where was I? Oh, yeah. Scott stood up, defended Senator Morante, and explained why he was correct in his statements. Senator Chambers was visibly upset, and on his next step on the mic, he excoriated Scott for standing up and angrily dubbed Scott as the mama bear to the clack. While Senator Chambers, I believe, meant the comment as a slight to Scott, he wore that label with pride. Scott's loyalty to his friends was always something he was proud of, and there was never a time that he failed to defend his friends or what he knew was right, whether it be in the legislature or in life. And of course, because Scott would hate for me to end my comments too seriously, one lighthearted note: because of Scott's leadership at the clack and his general joviality, it was possible for someone who, I might add, is still truthfully unknown, to create the Facebook persona of Senator Ken Lautenbaugh, the senator of the 50th district in Nebraska. The escapades of Senator Lautenbaugh were widely illustrated on the Lautenbaugh Facebook page, where he regularly commented on the legislative proceedings, all with Scott's tacit blessing. Whether it was his belief and the advocacy for goat safety as the chair of the Nebraska Goat Association, his fundraising prowess, or his wild endorsements of numerous political candidates in Nebraska, it was a lighthearted, satirical parody of the legislative shenanigans of Scott and the clack. So with that, thank you, Scott, for all the great times and all the life's lessons you imparted to me and everyone who had the pleasure of knowing you. It was a privilege to know you and an honor to call you friend. As Scott often said, it's not goodbye, but see you again. Godspeed, my friend. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Next up, we have a client of Scott's. You don't often get to hear from a client in an event like this, but it's an interesting tale, fascinating one. Not surprisingly, she's brought a friend. So please welcome from Scatterjoy Acres, Joy Bartling.
More than a client than a friend, let me tell you. I met Scott probably, I would say 8 years ago at this funny event that they do on the 23rd of December at it's called the Festivus, right? Because he loved Frasier and they get to grieve everything that they get to grieve for the year, right? And we were honored to be able to bring some of our support animals that we use in our animal assisted therapy program. And he's always been a supporter of Scatterjoy Acres. And 4 years ago, unfortunately, we became a client of Scott's because for 10 years, I've been trying to fight the Humane Society. They kept telling me that I couldn't have certain animals that we could have. Because I was different, even though we had the same license as any national zoo. And they came and seized some of our animals. And so Scott stepped up and he took the fight. And we gave them about a week to get it figured out. And then a couple of my board members and Scott went above and beyond, sent letters to the governor, to all the political people that need to be had. And all I remember is the day that we got called into the office of the county attorney. He said, please don't ever do that again. But anyway, Scott fought for us, and because he knew the passion that I have, that we've been doing for 18 years, serving this community with our animals. Sailor is one of our service dogs. I remember the message I got from Sarah when Scott had passed. And she said, I had never prayed before, but I prayed that time. And he was able to be free. And Sarah and her mom have both been out and they've been supportive of us, and they know what those animals make happen in their lives. I have since then shared, we have tons of cameras around our ranch, and she's watching the sloths now and the baby puppies that were just born on Christmas, trying to help make their lives a little bit simpler and try to process this grief just as we all are. Because I've heard many stories about Scott from a lot of you, such as napkins that messages were written on. Yeah. But the one thing that Scott always said is that he loved everyone and he cared for everybody. And this talk isn't over. He's still talking to us. And he's looking down on each and every one of us as we continue to walk this journey on this world that we are walking. And he will continue to touch us even though the grieving is hard. And I am thankful that I got to be part of his path, along with the family members that are represented by him and the people that are part of his life. I know you all have your stories. I've been reading them. The students who he was teaching pre-calculus walking down the hallway in high school, to the politicians that he was helping escort down the hallway and giving them words of advice. He will continue to do that in his own personal way as we make this journey. Thank you.
Thank you, Joy. I love that story. If you know the whole story, it's Scott in a nutshell. The Humane Society pissed him off like 10 years before. So they were on the list. And he waited. They did. They ticketed him for letting his dog sit out front and have a good time. And he was like, this isn't going to stand. I will disband you. And so then when a friend of his was in need, Scott wasn't a zoo lawyer. He didn't know what he was doing. But he learned what he needed to learn. He brought his power to bear, and he fixed an injustice, and they dropped the charges. It was everything about Scott all in one place, and it was done not only out of retribution, mostly out of retribution, but but also because he saw an injustice to fix. So, our next speaker, I'm going to bring up Kyle, one of Scott's twin sons. But I've got to tell a story about Kyle first. I helped when Scott was running for re-election in 2000, maybe 10. The twins were maybe 8 years old, and he was in a parade in Arlington. I know some of you know the story. I happened to be there, and they told the boys who were in the back of a truck, they're like, all right, you just take the candy and you throw it to the kids. And there was a look in their eye, like they didn't quite get it, and we should have followed up. Because as the truck rolled forward about 8 feet with the big Scott Lautenbaugh for legislature sign, I believe it was Nate, picked up a handful of Tootsie Rolls and just spiked it at these kids. Like kids are diving out of the way, and we're like, no, you don't do that. No, just take the candy and just gently toss it out to the kids. And he had another look in his eye, and we should have followed up. He didn't quite get it, so what he did next was take a handful of candy, throw it out, and yell, "Here you go, poor people." Because as an 8-year-old, he couldn't fathom why these people would sit on a 105-degree curb for Tootsie Rolls. They must not afford it. Now, that may have been Kyle, but since Kyle agreed to speak, I'm going to blame that on Nate. Kyle Lautenbaugh, everybody.
Thank you. It was Nate. I mean, I tried to prepare words to say today. It's pretty tough. Can you guys hear me? All right. First and foremost, I want to thank everyone for being here. Seeing all of you guys here gathered in his spirit. He was a friend more than anything. I've never met anybody that's claimed he's an enemy of him. And this is what I got. I love all of you guys. Thank you for being here. He was larger than life. But dear Scott, I still can't believe you're gone. I probably will never believe. I can believe in all the great memories you left us with, though. I remember our first Husker game you took me to. Nebraska got blown out by Texas A&M. Big 12 refs. It was still one of the best days of my life to date. I remember a few years later, you were appointed to the legislature, and I thought it was the coolest thing in the world. You were the man. When we toured the state capitol in 4th grade, you made sure to give our classes a special tour of your office, making Nate and I feel like the man as well. You were the life of the party. Everywhere we went, someone always felt the need to come and say hi to you, shake your hand, and tell us what a great guy you were. I remember all the parties thrown, the Husker parties at the house, the 3rd of July parties at the Coveys and Wareme's hosted together. I remember, though, when he got the projector, had the Husker parties in the basement, I thought, damn, watching the Husker parties in the projector, it can't get much cooler than that. He fucking called my bluff and one up me, though. He took the projector outside to the side yard and showed the game on the side of the house. And that was another moment where I thought, you were the goddamn man. The memories go on, and moral of the story is you were the man. I cannot call this a goodbye, more of a see you later. Love your son, Kyle. And I just want to thank everybody again for being here. It means a lot.
Thank you, Kyle. Next up, we have a great and dear friend of Scott's. Please welcome Stephanie Brandon. There she is.
Can you hear me okay? Yes? Okay. I'm not a good speaker. This is generally not in my wheelhouse. I prefer being behind the scenes with Laura. But how can I not speak about Scott? The second I met him, we had an immediate connection, an extension of my best friend, Laura. The first thing I noticed was his kind, genuine eyes, his laughter and quick wit. He walked into my life like he'd always been there. I love seeing the marshmallow side of Scott, how he spoke about the boys and all the stories of them growing up, of Sarah, and mostly how madly he loved Laura. It's so evident to everyone just how much. Every time he looked at her, it was magic, and it was relationship goals for everyone. Laura always included me in all the plans. Prescott, which is our nickname for Scott, never made me feel like the third wheel. Even when I tried to bow out, I'd get the text that would say in capital letters, "You're going." And that was that. Our road trip to Montana was no different. I know Deb talked about it. Prescott asked if I wanted to go with them to see her. And I said, well, it sounds fun, but isn't that, that's your family? And he said, your family. You're going. And that was that. The best compliment he ever paid me was when I wasn't able to attend something because I had plans and I couldn't go. Everybody was weighing in. And he said, well, whatever for all of you guys, but what we need to address is this. I'm fairly offended that Stephanie actually has other friends. So for over a year, I spent every day with Laura going over to Scott's. He decided to update his house and he asked for my input. Starting small, of course, wink, wink, that led into the domino effect of doing everything. We would paint, go pick out furniture, accessories, lighting, whatever it was. Every day we would work, but mostly we would laugh hysterically. He could hear us in his office and we hear him laugh, and then he'd add to our conversation from up there, and we all thought it was just the best thing ever. He embraced being outnumbered by us and gave us free rein. We duly noted anything that he actually mentioned. One thing that he wouldn't allow us to change were the candles on his fireplace that he controlled with his voice commands. Those couldn't be moved. He loved them so much. So that's why the candle urn is so significant. I'm so fortunate to have spent so much time with Prescott. He always said he felt like we'd been friends for at least 30 years, and I always agreed. And as you know, he had a way of making everyone feel important. Being with both Prescott and Laura brought out the very best in me. His impact is evident. Everybody loved him, and I'm forever grateful to have had him in my life and call him family.
Thank you, Stephanie. Next up, Sarah Nelson is Laura's daughter, who I'm sure all of you know. She was a big part of Scott's life during the last 4 to 5 years, and was a big part of how soft he became. And we all saw a big change in Scott, and not for the worse. So, Sarah, come on up.
Oh, hello, everybody. I think I'm the only one that did not write anything because I just could not find the right words, and I don't want to talk too long. But as Scott would know, I was never prepared for anything, so this is perfect. Oh, I told myself I wasn't going to cry, so I'm trying not to. Really happy that you're all here. It means a lot. Oh, Scott. So before him and my mom started dating, there were a lot of just fun memories just out and about. I would see him at Voodoo. I would see him, everywhere that we all went. He was just always there, and it was just never a good time without Scott there. And so one night I took him home, and he was in my passenger seat and had reclined himself back, and I was just talking about something, and he just started snoring, and it was just how it was. And I was like, I just knew right then. I was like, yeah, he's a fun guy. So, and then from there, him and my mom started dating, and oh, sorry. He was so compassionate and so understanding. Like, I had the worst summer of my life last summer, and he was just there for all of it. I would be having a bad day, and he would just, thank you, I would just go over and be like, what am I going to do today? Oh, go to Scott's and hang out with my mom and Scott. And he would always be sous vide stuff, and, he just, oh, sorry, I'm going to try to not cry because he wouldn't have wanted that. But he just made me always feel so welcome and treated me like his own daughter. And I just had a lot of fun. The last time that I got to hang out with him before the hospital, it was the day that this stupid movie Candy Cane Lane came out, and I told my mom and Scott, I was like, guys, I don't know if this movie's gonna be any good, but it has Eddie Murphy in it, and it has to be good. So we put it on, and my mom and I were like, this is the dumbest fucking movie we've ever seen. So we were like checked out. We just stopped watching it. But towards the end, I asked Scott, I was like, what the hell happened in this movie? Why was this going on and why was this happening? And he just like knew, he just explained everything. And so I went home that night, and I think it was the next day I put the movie on and I watched it the whole way through, and I was like, wow, that actually wasn't that bad. So thank you to Scott for having me actually follow through with it. So that was the most recent memory with him, but there's so many. I could go on and on. We put up Christmas lights, the three of us, my mom, my boyfriend, Nick, and me, and the lights just kept going out, like the little candles, they just kept going out. And my mom was like, well, this is Scott's way of saying, yeah, this shit was always just too hard. I mean, he could never get them to be just perfect. So it was it was just so funny because they still will just go, the candles will just go out, and it makes me laugh every time. And then my cat Rocky, and my mom moved over there with him. Rocky loved him, and Rocky did not like a lot of people. And so he would always just sit and watch Scott, and now he always sits in his recliner. So it's pretty cool to see because he never sat in that recliner before. Oh, I have so many stories and so many memories, but the sous vide, watching dumb movies, and him just being so compassionate and welcoming to me. I mean, I could go on and on, but yeah, I have a lot of love for Scott. I mean, I will say it was very important, as hard as it was as he was passing. When I held his hand, and I didn't want him to go, but it was just such a surreal moment to be able to be like just in that moment with him. It was just so hard because I was like, I don't want you to go, but it's just the whole thing is so hard, but so I'm just so grateful that we've got the time that we had with him, because there's no one like Scott, and I think we all know that. So yeah, thank you for allowing me to speak and be a mess. So, but Scott, I love you very much.
We're gonna bump. We're not bumping anybody, but we're squeezing in a bonus. Charlie Jansen. Charlie. Charlie's in that small group of people that did things with Scott that they're not allowed to talk about. I'm kidding. It's a very large group of people.
No, he's not wrong. There's not much I could actually say. I would say, though, my fondest memory of Scott was when Nate and Kyle and Shelly came out to a small pond I have outside of Fremont one day, and they decided to come out there. It was a year after I was elected to the legislature, got to know Scott, and as mentioned, he also took me under his enormous wing, and we went out there and we just had a good day. And the twins were little at the time, and they were fishing, and they suck at fishing. And there's a ton of fish in this lake. So then the two boys found a net, and they caught quite a few fish in that net. So it was a great day for us. We all had a great time, and I think that, and I said I'd be quick, and that was great for Senator Lautenbaugh's career in wildlife, because the next year he took on a bill that essentially wanted to eradicate the deer population in the state of Nebraska. So Scott, not being one to go small, I think he said, we want to do each hunter gets 50 deer per license, this and this and this. And he always went big, quick. He eventually got this bill passed, by the way, but I'll pass on that story. It got amended down. But in the hearing, he was sitting there in a prim and proper business suit. And this guy who's a hunter gets up in the committee hearing, and he's like, Senator Lautenbaugh, have you ever had a license to hunt? Have you ever hunted? Now, Scott has never had either, to my knowledge. He goes, sir, I would contend that any resident of the state of Nebraska that has a legal license to drive a vehicle is a hunter of deer in Nebraska. We'll miss Scott. I'll miss him. He's a great friend. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlie. All right, up next, a good friend of Scott's. The entire background of how you guys know each other and met each other is all under court seal. Please welcome to the podium, Ahmed Murad.
It's always the Egyptian that gets bumped. I miss our friend. It breaks my heart that our group will never be the same again. All I can hold on to is what we have done over the time of our lives. We all have our stories, and hopefully we will continue to talk about them for years to come. These are just a few of mine. To Dan. A few nights during the week, Dan would always pick up Scott at his house for the night. It's very obvious that a great time was being had. At the end of the night, when everyone has gone home, Scott and Dan would hop in the truck, and then Scott would turn to Dan and say, "So, hot house for one?" To Stacy. Scott's home was a haven for us. We all looked forward to getting together at Scott's, and Scott was always the gracious host with adult beverages, if you know what I mean. Every time Spacey's voice would reach Muppet level, Scott would insist on having her stay. And the next morning, Scott would have breakfast ready and maybe a mimosa to start off the day. To Paris. Scott always had a diverse group of friends. He always enjoyed what everyone had to say about subjects he either knew very well or not at all. He even has a friend that can't pronounce the word pizza. No, it was pizza. To Kurt and Stacy. In the summertime, Tater and Stacy would have us over for some pool time and maybe a boat ride. They never did anything halfway. The food was always off the charts. Whether it was pizza or sushi. Not to be outdone in the food prepping, department, Scott would go on into how he made a tenderloin in the sous vide that lasted for 17 hours, but it was scrumptious. I can see Laura's eyes rolling right now. That's it. To Amy. Okay, don't stick together now. To Scott, there are some stories that are entertaining and some that just made him say, "I don't need to hear your life story, bitch." Although we have all heard that when, a time or another, it feels like Scott said that to Amy a little bit more. To Sam. What can I say about Sam? No, seriously, what can I say about Sam? I suppose the only thing that there is their love for Stella Beer and the Republican Party. I'm sure both of them are hurting right now. There was that one time when he was going to beat Laura at Asteroids. Stephanie. Stephanie became one of us right from the beginning. I'm sure there's like a creepy freaking old movie about one of us somewhere in there somewhere. How long has it been now for us? Now, 10, 15 years or so? I don't know how long we've known each other. I really believe that Scott's house would have never got anything done if it wasn't for her. I remember one time they drove to Montana to visit his sister a couple of years ago. On their way back, they found themselves in Lingle, Wyoming, of all places. They just had to stop at a bar there called Bitch's Corner. As well as Laura and Stephanie. Okay. As well as Laura and Stephanie's sense of adventure is only outdone by their sense of humor. Okay, this is got a statement. They even brought me back a memorabilia. Here it is. Bitch's Bar. Whew. Laura, I've never seen anyone so happy as when I saw her with Scott. Now I've never seen anyone so sad. The way both of their faces lit up when you were around each other was so beautiful that it would have made Romeo and Juliet blush. I remember when we were on vacation in Florida and decided to try parasailing. Scott had a fear of heights. He didn't like them. And Laura was so excited that she kept going on and on about what to expect. After they all got buckled into it, Scott says, "Oh my God, would you please be quiet?" That was all the proof that you needed to know how much that Scott would have done for you to the end of the world. Now the gleam is a little bit more dimmed in all our eyes, but I hope one day that it will come back. I miss my friend. There are thousands of other stories that I could share with y'all, from free legal advice to discussing the better version of the man who sold the world. That's right. There was a time I was having a drink at the Report Inn, all by myself, waiting for someone. I was a little bored, so I texted the group to pass the time a little bit, where I'm sure I was making fun of somebody. About 10 minutes later, Africa by Toto came on the jukebox. I tried to convince everyone that Egypt is in both Africa and Asia. But some of the people just weren't having it. So they started playing that song everywhere we went. It turns out that Scott had actually tapped into the system from all the way across town just to make sure that I did not go one day without not hearing it. We can all take some comfort now that he's resting in peace. It just sucks for the rest of us.
We are coming to a close. The next speaker is one of the most unlikely friendships that I would have ever predicted. When Senator Justin Wayne and Scott first met, and I was first introduced to him as a friend, my instincts took over, right? Because Justin Wayne, in our non-political unicameral, is a registered Democrat. And I hope I'm not telling you that for the first time. And my initial instincts were, okay, Scott's doing that keep your enemies closer thing, because he was a very savvy politician. And as I watched their friendship bloom over the years, it never made sense. And it was also perfect. Watching these guys together, whether they agreed or disagreed, socially and politically, Scott recognized early on that he wasn't just a leader, he was an influential leader in the unicameral. And then to watch them become personal friends, and since then I've been lucky enough to become personal friends, was truly a remarkable thing to see. And so I'm very honored that he agreed to speak tonight. Please welcome State Senator Justin Wayne.
Just like, can you hear me? Just like Scott, to have the two minorities go together right back to back. All right. Boy. And Egypt is in Africa. This has been an ongoing thing with me and him. So my goal is to not get this through, without tears. And I can just hear Scott yelling, especially after last session. You better not cry and be like the other Democrats. So I'm working real hard on this, all right? But Scott started with me when I ran for learning community. And it wasn't because he supported me. My opponent was Senator Chambers. So I learned quickly what it was really about. But nevertheless, I was on the school board, and that's when me and Scott got real close, taking on the foundation mafia is what I call them, and so does he. then he's the one who convinced me to run for legislature. And I'll tell you, going into this session, I took my first drive since his passing, and this session is going to be real hard. So I wrote down some things I wanted to say, but I think Scott's telling me not to. So I'm going to tell you about a story that literally there probably was one person who's watching that knows, and she's at home sick, but nobody else in the country knows except for probably Chief Schmatter. So we were at a funeral, and this funeral of somebody who was close to both me and him, and this individual died. Obviously, we were at a funeral. I was sitting in the same row with the governor and the mayor, and the alleged shooter sat right next to me. Now, the streets talk all the time in my neighborhoods and in where I represent. And I leaned over to Scott and said, I think the alleged shooter is here to influence one of the witnesses or the alleged witness. So during the funeral, I get up to give a hug to the mother to inform her I'm asking the governor and the mayor to leave. And I'm going to escort this person to a room, but I need to talk to the pastor to find out where that room is. Scott, being Scott, decided he was going to escort the witness. And we go back to this room, and we eventually get the governor and the mayor out of the church. And I look at Scott and like, what are you going to do? You can leave, man. This is not your issue. And Scott looked at me and said, I got it. Now, if you know Scott, Scott is not a person to carry a weapon or a gun. I am. But I did not put one in because I was going to a church, right? Who thinks you would need one? So I'm like, hey, Scott, I will run out and give you my gun, or what are you going to do? And Scott looked at me and said, I got this. And that's the same look that Scott gave me the night we were at Vegaloo, it's a bar, talking about shrinking the OPS school board. That was the same look when we were talking about the cigars. That was the same look when he wanted to take on charter schools. And at that point, I knew I couldn't argue with Scott to get him not to stay there. So Scott stayed with this alleged witness for an hour and a half until after the ceremony, until this person cleared, and that he could personally escort this alleged witness to Omaha Police Station. That's the kind of individual your father was. Most people do a lot of things for the likes and the clicks, except for the Suve post. He didn't do it for the likes and the clicks. But he was a person who, if he believed something needed to be done, he was the first person to jump in line and not ask any questions. He was the first person who decided maybe a 12-member OPS school board is not functional, so let's figure it out when nobody else would. He always wanted what was best for Omaha, Nebraska, but particularly North Omaha, who he had no connection to. He grew up in South Omaha. For me, he was a person, when you talk about loyalty, showed up without any questions. He would defend me to his own party and defend me to people publicly. Now, privately, he would correct my ass. And he would always start off with, I disagree with you on this, but here's how you should handle this. He would always show me my blind spots. We would have conversations about every morning going down to the legislature about what blind spots am I seeing and how this bill is not about you versus Grony. This is about Nebraska and the kids you represent. Sometimes that came through, sometimes it didn't. My point is that when you talk about a man who would just show up, who would always do what was right no matter what it was, who looked around and knew that there was the shooter in a church, didn't care. That's who Scott Lautenbaugh was. He wasn't somebody who just did political things to do political things. He believed in it. And whether you agree with it or not, he would sit down and talk to you about it. He had me introduce a bill on behalf of Scattered Acres. And I think that bill brought Lautenbaugh and Lathrop together. I saw Lathrop earlier. Lathrop said that was the most interesting hearing he ever had. And I said, wow, Scott's working magic. It didn't get out of committee though, but that's another problem. Here's the thing. He taught me about loyalty as showing up. Sometimes you might have to take arrows, sometimes you might have to take hits, and me and Scott have been through the fire. My party has disowned me. I'll never forget the first year. We had a salute to senators, and Scott was down the other side of the bar, and he was like, don't come over and associate with me. They already think we're too close. By the end of the night, we were still having drinks and going to Alibaba afterwards. My point is that Scott, I will always miss the real conversations we had. We didn't agree on everything, but you were always there for everything. When you saw something that you thought was wrong, you stood up and you fought, even if it was against your own party. He is the kind of politician we should all strive to be for. He is the kind of person we should always strive to be. This person didn't know what was happening in that church, but he sprang into action. That's the kind of man I hope I will be. Spring into action when things are wrong. Protect the public the best you can, and understand that our most precious people are kids, and they deserve every opportunity to be the best that they can be. If you agree with those principles, then you agree with what Scott did that day at that church. He was protecting a 17-year-old girl to make sure nothing happened. Don't worry, Kobe, I got this clear with Mark Weber from the Supreme Court that I could tell the story. Make sure I don't break any attorney-client privilege. My point in saying all this is, there's the politician, there is our individual friends, but the reason why I told that story is there is the man. And that man has touched every one of us in a special way. But that girl is no longer in the state. That case was never closed, but that girl is alive today because of this individual. Thank you.
I will say, Justin, you're a lot more like Scott than you might realize. A week ago, maybe it wasn't a week. We had a family friend, someone that we were both very close with, got into some trouble, got into a scrape. We had about an hour's notice before a hearing, and I was out of options. I called Justin. I said, "Hey, it's noon." I said, "Can you be in court at 1 o'clock?" And he said, "On my way." Then he asked questions. That's what Scott would have done. That's what Scott would have done. So you're a lot more like him than you think, man. All right, our final speaker of the night is Laura. Laura, we all knew Scott in different phases of his life. I've known him for 2.5 decades, and when you know somebody that long, they change over time. They become different people. They have different jobs, different interests. And then in the last 4 years of his life, when Laura was part of it, there was this brand new Scott that I don't think anybody could have predicted. He was softer, and he was like compassionate. The fact that he had a nickname for his girlfriend is something that I would have thought Scott would have hated. But he, around her, was a different person, a better person than we all knew. He was the best version of himself. And so now we're going to hear from Laura. If you please come up.
Thank you. I have props. This isn't as long as it looks. I just didn't want to have to wear readers. So speaking of the nicknames, we have, I'm his kitten and he's my puppy. So, okay. I have no idea how I'm going to get through this, but I do know that my grief, I'm just going to read because otherwise I'll lose it. My grief isn't as important as celebrating Scott's life, so I will find the strength to get through this. I do have a request before I forget. Scott went through many, many units of blood in the hospital, so if you're able to, please schedule a blood donation at the Red Cross in his memory. For those who didn't know us as a couple, we started hanging out on December 25th, 2019, so just shy of 4 years together. 1,452 days to be exact. He gave me this ring about a year ago. It's too big. It has our anniversary date laser cut into the band. Thank you, Stephanie, for giving him the idea. We both agreed that we didn't need to get married. We lived together and shared our lives. And we both felt like we were more married than any piece of paper could ever prove. But yet Scott always played this game called Here's the Song We're Going to Dance to at Our Wedding. It started out with Let's Stay Together by Al Green, which quickly became our song. And he would throw it on the jukebox whenever we were out, in between his frequently played Africa by Toto, which was always dedicated to our friend Ahmed. But over the years, in Africa, but over the years, he would come up with some really hilarious first dance songs. The latest one he threw out is the Torgo theme music from a movie called Manos, The Hands of Fate, which was our favorite MST3K movie. And if you don't know what that is, then congratulations, you're not a total nerd like we are. In those almost 4 years, we discovered what I have no shame in describing as a fairy tale kind of love. Our love for each other was unconditional and grew stronger and deeper every single day. I don't think I laughed more in those, I might need a Kleenex, in those 4 years than in my 50 years of life prior to that. We both love to travel, and in our time together, we made it to Las Vegas, Fort Myers, Ohio, Chicago, Montana, Miami, Virginia, the Dominican Republic, and Maui twice. And lest we not forget, there was a time when we were always trying to make it to Lighthouse for one. We could finish each other's sentences, and we had no problem just being and hanging out and doing absolutely nothing, or watching our 2 Jeopardies on the DVR every day, and I would invariably kick his butt. Scott accepted me and all of my flaws without question or judgment, as I accepted his. We never had a single argument in those 4 years. Sorry. But then again, we never discussed politics. Something we had gotten into the habit of doing almost every night was sharing a pint of Ben & Jerry's non-dairy Cherry Garcia in one bowl with 1 spoon. So if you're ever at the store sometime and run across this delicacy, please get it and share it with someone you love. And remember that Scott did occasionally enjoy vegan food. He even got quite proficient at cooking vegan for me in his precious sous vide. You guys know I couldn't get through this without some sort of sous vide reference. I'm going to get back to a couple funny stories in a sec, but I just want to have a tug to share something with all of you. Some questions that I've really been battling since he passed. Really, why did this happen? Why did we only get 4 years together? Why couldn't it have been me instead of him? I ordered Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning, from Amazon a couple days after he went into the hospital, but before he had emergency surgery. And the book arrived the day before he passed away. I ran across it quite literally just a few days ago. I had stuck it on a corner table and it had fallen off and I tripped on it in the dark, and then I went on to read it from cover to cover. Now, the last thing you guys want, or what Scott would want, is a book report. So I'm only going to share a couple of passages that really spoke to me. Dr. Frankl survived Nazi death camps and wrote about finding meaning and joy despite the horrors and atrocities of Auschwitz. He was separated from his wife when they reached the concentration camp, and over the course of his time there, he had no idea if she was alive or dead. He focused every day on the imaginable horrors that he was enduring, thinking about his wife, remembering all of the sweet and funny stories that they shared. He finally had an epiphany. Love is the ultimate and the highest goal to which man can aspire. The greatest secret that human poetry and human thought and belief have to impart is the salvation of man is through love and in love. He understood how a man who has nothing left in this world still may know bliss, be it only for a brief moment, through the contemplation and memory of his beloved. His mind clung to the image and memories of his wife. And while he didn't even know if she were alive, he knew one thing. Love goes far beyond the physical person of your beloved. Another element of the book is the knowledge that no matter what we're faced with, no matter how dire the situation might seem, and even if it feels like everything is hopeless, we always have a choice, and that is simply how we respond or react to the situation in front of us. Dr. Frankl said that the meaning of suffering is tied to the meaning of life. When we're no longer able to change a situation, thinking of an incurable disease or inoperable cancer, we're challenged to change ourselves. No one can take away the power that we have to choose how we respond to things that we feel we have no control over. What reading those and other passages did for me was to help me try to reframe this unbearable loss. I've been so focused on, why wasn't there more time? Why did we only get 4 years together? And this just isn't fair. But what I'm going to try to do from now on is to wake up every single day and be utterly and completely grateful for the time that we had together. I'm grateful we had 4 years and not 3 or 2 or 1. I'm going to spend every day for the rest of my life talking to him when it's quiet and reminiscing with him about all of this stupid shit that only we would find funny. And I am going to tell him every single day how much I love him with all my heart, and that we will be together again someday. That being said, don't expect me to be oozing nothing but gratitude 24/7. I have no doubt I will still burst into tears when something reminds me of him, so I apologize in advance for that. But I am going to aspire to live in gratitude for the time that we had together on this earth. Another quick, one of my props was the book. Okay, it's in there somewhere. Another nerd alert story real quick. We were watching a documentary about black holes on Netflix a couple months ago. My idea, I know. And one of the astronomers was talking about the vastness of space. And he touched on how he used to feel like everything can be explained with science and there isn't a real meaning to life except through science. But then he said, with a beaming smile on his face, "Then I fell in love." And Scott and I both looked at each other and went, "Aw." We went back to our nerd fest, but still, that still sticks with me. What's the meaning of life? It truly is love. And if that means spending only 4 years or even just 4 days with the love of my life, it makes everything else worth it. My love for Sarah and Scott's boys has no limit either. And their love for me is truly what's keeping me going. One thing that Scott and I talked about over the years was that whomever goes first will take care of all of our kids. Sarah, you're stuck with me. But Kyle and Nate, you're stuck with me too. I love you guys. Sarah gets sick of me worrying and checking in on her, I think. But Kyle and Nate, you're going to have to allow me that to continue and to continue to remind you that I love you. Sarah loves you. And even Rocky is warming to both of you, even though it's only taken a year. I know. Scott entrusted me to take care of his kids and his final wishes, and I intend to uphold and honor that with every ounce of my being. One final nerd alert story. Something I posted to Facebook on July 10th, 2015, and it's speaking to me now. I tried to start something that I called Philosophical Fridays to push back on the inane Throwback Thursday posts, but sadly it didn't catch on. I know it's shocking. The first quote I shared was from Soren Kierkegaard, and it says, "The most painful state of being is remembering the future, particularly the one you can never have." I could easily see myself wallowing in grief for the rest of my life and remembering the future that I feel was robbed of both of us. I know that isn't what Scott would want for me or for any of us in this room. So what I'm committed to doing is not ending Scott's celebration of life tonight, because I plan on celebrating his life and our time together for the rest of my time here on earth and being so grateful for the time that we had together. Oh gosh, that's a prop. Okay, I have to get this out really quick here. Hold on. All right. Here's the book. Here's the Ben and Jerry's. And the last thing is this sign that says "Love you more." Okay, so We said I love you to each other dozens and dozens of times a day, so much so that we had a secret little hand squeeze that we employed whenever we were out with our friends so they wouldn't get too sick of us. But I found that sign, I think it was a few years ago, and it was something we would take turns putting on each other's side of the bed. And if there was ever a time that one of us forgot to move the sign, we would lord it over the other one. Well, I guess I really do love you more then, and stuff like that. And he was so serious about the sign that he would sneak it on trips, and we would switch it every night and every morning in the hotel room. And I was going to play his ringtone. I'll do that another time, or maybe out in the patio with a cigar. I don't know. He signed off one of his texts to me a couple months ago, the last boyfriend, because of a meme we found that said being someone's first love may be great, but to be their last is beyond perfect. I could go on and on with funny stories, but odds are that no one but Scott and I would think they're funny. So thank you again for joining us tonight. I hope we can enjoy a cigar on the fire pit later. And I'm so grateful for everyone who came together to help me put this together for Scott. To my puppy, I love you with all my heart, and we will be together again someday. I just hope they have Jeopardy in heaven, because I will have a lot of kicking your butt to catch up on. Thank you.
I didn't speak tonight, but I do want to say thank you to all my friends, family, Scott's colleagues that came out tonight. It means a lot to all of us. I'm not a huge public speaker. Never got that from my dad. So it's very, honestly, crazy to see how many people have been here all night long. So I can't thank you guys enough for being here. To my family, to Scott's colleagues, to my friends. I mean, it's unbelievable. I mean, he was very loved, obviously, and it makes all of us feel a lot better that he was very loved, not much hated. I mean, people that didn't hate, they didn't come because fuck them. But so it's been an honor to have. Oh, sorry. It's been an honor. It's been an honor to have you guys here all night long. And what was that? Like we're in Addies again. Okay. So it's been an honor to have all you guys here tonight. I really appreciate everyone coming to show love and give your kind words to me, Kyle, Laura, Sarah, Nick, my mom, my dad's side of the family, everyone. So, I mean, I really appreciate everything that's happened tonight. And with that being said, I'd like to pass on to Chris Covey. Love you guys. Thank you for coming out. I appreciate it very much.
Well, since I have the last word, I'm going to take it. I think one thing I've heard throughout, and it's something I've been thinking about a lot the last week, is as sad as this is, we're all very, very, very lucky. Every single person in this room is very lucky. There are most of the people in the entire world never got to meet Scott. And every single person in this room got to have him as part of our lives, whether it was little or big. We all got to enjoy Scott. We all got to know Scott. The memories of Scott, every time I think of Scott, no matter what situation I'm thinking of, I revert back to him in a chair, leaning back with a cigar, holding court. Whether there was 3 of us or 30 of us, he's there, he's laughing, he's in his stupid suspenders. And that's the Scott. That's the Scott I'm always going to remember. I mean, we've heard a lot about him, but that's every time I think about him, every story I come up, every barrister's night, I get back to some fire pit or some cigar bar where he's just chuckling with that big ass cigar in his hand, just laughing at nothing. So I'm going to propose a toast. I forgot my drink. And Kyle, if you could join me on my right here. Yeah. You're not drinking. Now that's ironic. That's better. He didn't pay for that either. Neither did Scott. Because that's what lobbyists are for. Father, statesman, politician, Scott Lautenbaugh was larger than life. He made an imprint on all of us. So here's to you, Scott. And I don't think there's any better way to sum this up. I'll hold this for you. than Scott Lautenbaugh for legislature. Cheers. Yeah, take your drink. Thank you all very much for coming. Thank you for those of you that helped bring this night together. We've got this place for a while, so feel free to just, I guess, take beers off the bar. Thank you for coming and do what Scott would have wanted. Stand around, drink, and talk about how great he was. Thank you.
There we go. All right. Hey, man.